This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
This is actually technically news from the fall, so it's from last fall. But I had this guy on my radar for a long time, and I think something's about to happen with him that's interesting. So I'm bringing him up here. Did you ever hear of a DNA profiling identification being done on a woman named Eileen Trupner?
No.
So I'm pretty sure that identification. So she is this Jane Doe from Florida, and I had her tagged for a really long time because she had a members only jacket. She was wearing a members only jacket, and I had her written up as members only Jane Doe. She was found in December of 1998, and she was found off of I-75 down in Broward County, Florida. She had been sexually assaulted, and there was a lot of evidence on her body that she had fought her attacker. Police went back and forth on whether or not she had been killed right there or if she had been killed elsewhere and then dumped. So she was a Jane Doe for the longest time. May 4th, 2023, it comes out that they have identified her 24 years later through genetic genealogy as she was Eileen Trupner. So when she died, she would have been 41 years old. She was born in 1957. She disappeared in August of 1998, and then she's found in December of 1998. I had, in my head, I had all these different images from the Doe Network site of just, South Florida Jane Doe. And finally, we kind of had a name. And then in December, it gets announced that Lucius Boyd had been indicted for her rape and murder. And Lucius Boyd is one of the most interesting people to me. One of the reasons he's interesting is he's a cross-race attacker, which for people who don't know what that means anymore, it's because we've kind of corrected ourselves in terms of time and science. It used to be believed that it would be a rare thing for a serial killer who was one race to attack people of another race. Now, Eileen is from Puerto Rico, and so that's why I'm saying, technically this would be a cross-race attack. But Lucius, he's already doing time. He's an interesting mess, is what I would say about him. And it's really hard to put together a lot of information about him. But he has a couple of people that he's looked at real hard for. Some of them kind of cross over into different killers' time spans. But if you go pull up the basic information on Lucius, it'll tell you that he was born in 1959 down in Broward County, Florida, and that his family owned a funeral home. He had been married twice and had 8 kids. In the 90s, he had been sued by 4 separate women for failure to pay child support. Now, he pops up in a couple of articles from Florida back in the 90s. One of them is this really long-form article by a guy named Bob Norman for the Broward Palm Beach New Times. It's from September 23rd of 1999. And it's a good read. I'm pretty sure it's still available online. It kind of tells you this strange story of one of Lucius's victims, which is this woman named Donia DaCosta. Ahead of what happened to her, Boyd had moved back into his family's home in Plantation, Florida. He had sort of been bouncing around a little bit. In 1996, his dad, James Boyd, who was the owner of the funeral home, he dies. Now, according to Lucius's family and his ex-wives, Lucius had a serious drug problem. He had been working in 1997 and 1998 as sort of a homeless handyman, but he was living some in his family's home. He had specifically been working as a handyman at a place called Hope Outreach Ministries. Now, he had a long criminal record long before he gets suspected of murder. It goes back to, from what I can tell, the most serious parts of it start in 1990. He chokes his second wife, a woman named Julie, to the point of unconsciousness. And something had been going on where Lucius was cheating on her, and she basically said she wanted to leave. And that's what starts them arguing. And that escalates from kind of normal arguing at first to some serious violence along the way, with him hitting her and strangling her. So he gets a charge of aggravated battery, which is a felony. But that gets knocked down to a misdemeanor. And ultimately, in that case, Lucius only ends up getting probation. Now, he's 31, 32 years old while that's going on. But in 1992, about a year after he's sentenced on the 1990 incident, Lucius gets accused of raping a girl on her 18th birthday that he's taken out on a date. The victim just wants away from him, so she declines to prosecute or provide prosecutors with a key witness in that case. And when victims do that back in the early 90s, prosecutors don't always follow up on those charges. In October of 1993, he gets his most serious charge when he stabs Roderick Bullard to death on a Fort Lauderdale street with a kitchen knife when they're fighting over an automobile. Roderick Bullard was the brother of a woman that Lucius Boyd had been seeing. Boyd told police at the time that Bullard had hit him and that he, quote, just lost it. So he ends up admitting that Bullard didn't have any kind of weapon. He didn't make any kind of threat towards him. And if you go back and read about this in 1994, he goes on trial. And Lucius's defense attorneys do a really good job tearing the victim apart. They point out that in his autopsy, Roderick Bullard had a significant cocaine level in his bloodstream. So the jury in that case ends up finding that Lucius Boyd's actions amounted to self-defense, and they acquit him altogether of killing Roderick Bullard. The next place that it picks up that Lucius has done something criminal is not until December of 1998. Dawn DaCosta was a 21-year-old student studying to be a nurse practitioner. And she left work at 10 o'clock on December 4th, 1998, and she went to church. She was at church until around 1 a.m. the following morning. And on her way home from church, her car ran out of gas on I-95. So Donia, she walks to a nearby Texaco, and there were a couple of witness accounts of her along the way and at the Texaco gas station. They noted that she looked scared. Behind her, they had seen a church van with the word Hope printed on the side. So Dania was seen getting inside this van, and there was a black man seen to be driving that vehicle at the time. Sometime after Dania gets into this van, the driver ends up striking her across the head. He takes her back to his apartment. He rapes her, he beats her, and he stabs her with a screwdriver 36 times. He wraps her body in bed sheets and then rolls the whole package up that has her inside these sheets in a plastic shower curtain, and he dumps her in an alley behind a warehouse in Oakland Park. And she's not found so we start out on December 4th, going into the morning of December 5th. She's not found till December the 7th. So detectives from Broward County Sheriff's Office, they began their investigation into her murder by looking for this van, this white van with the word Hope on the side of it. So it's a church van, says Hope on the side of it. They don't spot the van until January 30th of 1999. And it's seen in Lauderhill, Florida, in front of a Christian daycare center. The van's owner turns out to be a guy named Reverend Frank Lloyd. He gets interviewed on March 22nd of 1999. And Lloyd says that he is running Hope Outreach Ministries and that the van belongs to Hope Outreach. And he tells the cops that he's been employing a man who frequently uses the van named Lucius Boyd. So he told police that Lucius had been specifically using that van from December 4th to December 7th, which would have put him as being the driver of the vehicle that stops at the Texaco and picks up Dania DaCosta. March 25th of 1999, about 3 days after they interview Reverend Lloyd, a sample of Lucius Boyd's DNA comes back from the crime lab, and it's a match to the semen found on Dania DaCosta's body. So the next day, Lucius Boyd, he gets arrested. During these interviews that Boyd has with the police, Lucius claims that he has, quote, memory lapses. The detective who's interviewing him basically calls him a sociopath. He says he's a cold-blooded killer and he doesn't have a conscience. And the detective flat out says that he's going to go to jail for raping and killing Dania. Lucius makes the comment to the detective, "What took you so long to catch me?" And he then asks for an attorney. So he gets arrested, and detectives go and they search his apartment. And they find blood in his apartment that links him back to Dania DaCosta. And they are able to use evidence from Dania's body to link Lucius to the sheets, shower curtain. And before he gets sentenced to the jail, Lucius plays a race card. He basically says that the Broward County Sheriff's Office is working for the Ku Klux Klan. And he claims that he's being set up in an attempt to discredit his family name. So this is the family that ran the local funeral home there. Eventually, in June of 2002, almost 3 years later, over 3 years later, Lucius gets found guilty of Dania's murder, and he gets sentenced to death. Ever since then, Lucius has been on death row waiting execution. He's down in Union Correctional Institution, which is, it used to be known as the State Prison Farm of Florida. I think it was, one point it was known as Rayford Prison. It was Florida State Prison. But at this point in time, it's known as the Union Correctional Institution. Okay. So then fast forwarding to 2023, we come back around to Eileen Trupner. So she had been a Jane Doe for almost 25 years. And here's what's theorized happened to her. On December 18th of 1998, allegedly, Lucius Boyd attacks Eileen Trupner. This, at the time, just to give you a picture here, she's a pretty small woman, 41-year-old mother of two. She's from Puerto Rico. She's been living in South Florida since the mid-90s. The idea is that and you have to think about this in terms of timing. So December 4th, 1998, Lucius killed Dania DaCosta. That's what he's doing time for. Well, this is December 18th, 1998. Lucius Boyd takes Eileen Chupner. He drags her off a remote area of U.S. Route 27, which is would have been north of Interstate 75. He rapes her and he strangles her to death. And he then leaves her laying in the sawgrass there. Well, her body stays there for about a day, and a boater sees Eileen's body. She's been dumped lying face down. The evidence shows clearly she's been strangled and raped. It takes them until October of 2022 to really get back on that case. And they released multiple sketches of Eileen, who was still unknown. They end up spotlighting the murder in social media and the local news. And in May, they're able to use DNA samples from Eileen's surviving relatives to officially identify her as this South Florida Jane Doe. And evidence at the scene at the time links Lucius Boyd to Eileen's murder. And in December 2023, Lucius gets indicted for killing her. And that's sort of where we're at right now. But the thing about Lucius is they've always suspected that Lucius was a serial killer. Have you ever heard of him? Or like he pops up now and again in some of these like documentary shows for like an episode?
Yeah, I don't really remember. I don't remember having heard of him.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's always stayed on my radar because I suspect that people like him, and this is terrible to say, I think people like him sort of got to walk around a little bit longer, maybe not him specifically, because of people like Henry Lee Lucas. Like when they could, like he's the one that in my mind, when he confesses to all these cases, it's a guy like Lucius Boyd out there kind of wandering around. I bring him up here because obviously they've indicted him for this other crime in December 2023. It was interesting to me because we sort of gotten to this period where I think you called it an avalanche. I think we've seen the avalanche and now we're seeing kind of an ongoing blizzard. You think that would be fair to say a blizzard?
Well, yeah. I mean, I do kind of feel like we're still in the avalanche, but yeah, I mean, that would fit too.
Well, what's been so interesting about this is like now I've taken his information and I've gone back through like missing women and unsolved murders down in South Florida. This is what I was going to ask you about him. If a guy has killed another dude, like clearly, even though Lucius was found to have been in self-defense, when that happens, do you think that gives them sort of a green light, or is that proof they've maybe killed before?
I think that the way that it's described, anybody can lash out in the midst of a disagreement, or I don't even know how you would say that. And, you know, I think did he stab that guy to death? Is that what happened?
Yeah, he stabbed him to death.
I don't think that, and I might change my mind, but I feel like that's a completely separate thing. I feel like anybody that doesn't have emotional maturity or that is unable to control themselves could snap in the throes of an argument or whatever. And I do think that, obviously if he hadn't have been found to have been acting in self-defense, he would have been in prison, right?
Yeah.
Not forever, but like because of the timing of it, but he would have gone to prison for it. Now, I didn't sit through the trial. I don't know. The jury found him to have been acting in self-defense. And maybe it truly was self-defense. But, it states that the guy was unarmed, right? Yeah. And I do feel like there may be some hallmarks in somebody that carries a weapon and then like uses a weapon in a situation like that, because there's certain things that have to line up there because, some people could get into an argument with somebody and they're not going to have a weapon to use on somebody, even if they wanted to. There's a lot of things that lead up to things like that. I personally don't find it. I'm not sure how the jury interpreted that the guy that he killed was a danger to him, because it's like he had no weapon and he didn't make any threats. Like, I don't know what the jury followed the thought, because in theory, self-defense is like if one of you is going to die, right? And if you don't kill the other person, it's going to be you. And so you can imagine a situation like that where it's that kind of fight. Like, it's a fight where, you can't walk away from it and you're at that point. Well, that's a weird thing to be involved in to begin with, right? To let something escalate to that point. And so it's a certain type of person, I feel like. And, to see that I don't feel like that was the case with any of his victims.
No, it's not going to be self-defense with his victims. He's definitely hunting people.
But yeah, I don't even feel like it's a snapped type thing, right?
Correct.
He was, they did find him to have been acting in self-defense. I don't see information that adds up to that for me. It's weird, especially since, you've got a situation where what's said is like they were basically having an argument on the street, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, either one of them would have been free to walk away at any time, right?
Yeah.
And so, I take things like that into consideration. If you kill somebody in self-defense in your bedroom, that's a different situation than if you're standing out on the street, right? If you're in your bedroom, you probably really were acting in self-defense. But if you're out on the street, why don't you just go home? That would be probably the best defense.
Actually, I worried about his case for a long time. The original case, Dania. So he gets linked over the years to at least 3 other murders. At one point in time, I saw he was under investigation for 10 total unsolved homicides. One of them was a missing persons report, but the police have come out at different times, and they basically said they believe that they think he's responsible for the disappearance of Danielle Zaykot. So she goes missing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 1999. They believe he's responsible for the murder, potentially, of 24-year-old Melissa Floyd. Now, Melissa Floyd had been found off of I-95 in Palm Beach County. She had been stabbed multiple times, but she wasn't positively identified until 4 or 5 months after when she was found. And that was in August of 97. But it was near where, how did it work? She used to do drugs at either a house or a trailer that was near the funeral home. And her license or ID card or whatever she had, it was found on the funeral home grounds in September of 1997, which would have been, after she had been missing. I can't remember if it was after her body was found or not, because I'm pretty sure it was after her body was found. It wasn't after she went missing. But anyways, I've never seen a physical link to Melissa Floyd and Lucius Boyd, and I think it might just be the driver's license. I wondered, though, because hers was a stabbing. What is he more likely to do, stab or strangle? And he also is thought to be responsible for Patrice Alston. Now, she went missing in June of 1998, so that would have been 6 months ahead of these 2 murders. But I've wondered, how do you go about trying to link a guy like this to, because he's, from what I've read, he's on the hook for a couple of rapes, which is something we ran into last year with Bobby Joe Long. Those are complex to investigate.
From a journalist point of view, those are impossible to investigate.
Well, yes, but they're also complex to investigate from a police point of view because it's a lot of that investigation is done in like a large amount of hindsight. It's becomes a cold case and it gets linked by DNA through CODIS. But I don't know if people know how long it takes for an unsolved sexual assault to have DNA evidence, if it has it, and to wind its way into CODIS can be quite a while.
I think that it's more about having a match made is what takes so long a lot of times.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So,
Unfortunately, I feel like in Melissa Floyd's case, now Patrice Alston, her body hasn't been found, but Melissa Floyd, my concern is like they don't have any sort of evidence.
that's a possibility.
Because they had evidence in Eileen Trumpner's case, right?
Yeah.
Because they had to identify her and her attacker. And I don't know. It seems to me like if they were... Because my impression is those are like time and space associations, right?
Yeah.
And probably some other factors that come into play as far as, whatever they consider. But if they had evidence that they could link like they did in Eileen's case, they would have done so, right?
So one of the reasons he's stuck in my head, if you go hunting for information about him, is, okay, so the first victim, Danielle Zakat, her dad has actually petitioned for clemency multiple times related to Lucius's case. He does not want Lucius to be put to death before he has answers on what happened to Danielle. So that's an interesting story to me. But that he had these two homicides so close together, what I wanted to ask you today is, how would you investigate somebody like this in terms of like trying to put together a victim list? Isn't it a little weird?
I would ask him.
So you would just ask him?
I would, yeah. I would ask him. He's alive. He's on death row. He has absolutely nothing left to lose. And I would talk to him and I would ask him.
Well, I feel so awful for the family of these victims where there is a potential person like that more information could potentially be gleaned from. I don't think he's talking. I've read different articles about Danielle over the years. I think if she were alive today, I think she would be 50 this year. And, she's one of those vanishings that's like truly strange. The way that she's tied to Lucius, by the way. Okay, so, and they don't, if you go looking for him, you won't find this detail, I don't think, online, but this is my understanding. She was a graphics designer. And she was working at the time for a little company in, I think it's downtown Fort Lauderdale. I was trying to find the name of it while we're talking. The company she did graphics design for. Anyways, that's sort of irrelevant. No, she was working for a jeweler, but she was a graphic designer. So the way that it stands out in my head, and this might be on the Charlie Project profile, it's possibly on the wiki. So Danielle, she leaves her apartment around 10 p.m. on February 25th, 1999, which would have been right ahead of Lucius being questioned. Does that make sense, time-wise? So
Right.
So he's done these two murders in December 98. We're a month and change out. An employee at a Winn-Dixie store on Commercial Boulevard remembers Danielle coming into the grocery store. She purchases a loaf of bread, and she's never been heard or seen again. Now, they find her car in the Winn-Dixie parking lot 2 days later on February 27th. It's locked up, and she's one of those, like, there's nothing about her disappearance that's interesting in terms of like nothing's been used again. There's no cell phones from that time. There's no activity on her credit cards or her bank accounts. Her link to Lucius Boyd is she had designed the brochures for the Boyd family funeral home. And the idea was if she ran into him in the Winn-Dixie, then she might have recognized him or known him. And there was a witness that claimed they had seen her standing outside of the Winn-Dixie store the night she vanished, and that she was talking to a well-dressed African-American man. And she said that the two of them got into a sports car and drove off. That witness's statement has never been confirmed. Anyways, he's the news today. He's not actually the main case, but I just thought it was interesting that he had finally been indicted for Eileen Trupner's murder. And I'm hoping they'll maybe leverage that into more information and maybe kind of do, like, he pled not guilty. He came into court this week and he pled not guilty. So I'm hoping they'll do what you're suggesting and, like, just say, look, dude, why don't you just give us the list and just be known for what you've done and let us close all these cases out?
Well, and I feel like sometimes, investigators forget, like, the human side of things, right?
Yeah.
And so they're following, their protocol or whatever. And, like, I don't know. It would be interesting, especially if there was because there was at least a general acquaintance with Danielle Zako, right?
Yeah.
If she were to be one of his victims, that would be weird because...
Well, he had been known to be violent to people close to him, and he had killed one of his girlfriend's brothers.
Right. I understand that. I'm not saying that... It would just be weird that it's sort of like a random attack because she would have just run into him, right, at the grocery store. And it escalated so badly, right, or whatever happened. But I think I would just ask him because failing that, unfortunately, it's hit or miss as far as the actual, DNA evidence goes, like what's available, what could possibly tie him. When the bodies aren't located, there's really no way to, determine anything, right?
There's another murder from February of 1998. I'm pretty sure this one's going to be talked about, especially by the time we get around to releasing this particular series. I think it'll already be out there. A guy named David Abel wrote for the Palm Beach Post, and back in February 1998, he wrote an article that said prostitute found dead near canal along Beeline Highway. Now, this is a sex worker, 20-year-old woman named Gina Moore. She was found lying face down. She was also found by a boater, by the way. I've never seen a cause of death on her, but he said that she didn't have any gunshot or stab wounds and that she was possibly asphyxiated in his article. She had 10 arrests with the Broward County Jail. And in October of 1997, she had been taken into custody on charges of soliciting prostitution, indicating she might be like a full-time sex worker. There was another woman had been found in January of 1998. Her name was Lisa Palmer. She was 28 years old. She was found bound and weighted down in the M Canal down there. And they had also found Debbie Jean Montgomery. She had been strangled to death. I don't know about Lisa Palmer's cause of death. And LaToya Williams had been found in May the previous year. Would have been 97. She had been strangled under one of the overpasses. And, of course, we already mentioned Melissa Floyd. She was found off of I-95 around the same time. So they have this little stack of murders. Now, this is an article. This article that I'm reading is before we knew who Lucius Boyd was. It's February 1998. It's a couple of weeks before he's going to be accused for the first time of something that looks like it could potentially be a serial murder. But Gina Moore, I noticed that her sister is now talking about, her sister name is Amber. She's now talking about Lucius Boyd online. And she's definitely right in terms of time and place. If this guy were on a spree. The thing about Danielle Zakat is, I start with this a little differently. I was looking at it from the perspective of like, can we look at these unsolved homicides and sexual assaults and missing people from around that time and maybe attach Lucius to some of this stuff? But you actually you approach things a lot differently than I do. And when Danielle came up, you actually found what could potentially be a match for her.
Right. I think it would actually be a very good match for her. And that's based on the circumstances surrounding everything I know about her disappearance.
Okay. So,
for example, in this case, I just put in Florida after February 25th, 1999. And I think I may have clicked female.
Okay.
It gets me down to not a whole lot of unidentified bodies, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, this is the very first one that comes up. And as you scroll through the rest of them, it's pretty clear the rest of them aren't her. Okay. And so when I see something like this where you pull it up and the recreation, it looks like her, right? I mean, it really does. And then it's about the same height. There's a lot of similarities and she's not excluded. It's possible that's coincidental.
Right.
But I mean, we're 25 years out now.
Yeah, there's some major errors that happened with her. So you're talking about 1082?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so unidentified person 1082 was known as the Palm Beach County Jane Doe. Do you know the story?
No.
Okay, so she's found in Boynton Beach, Florida. The problem with her case that threw it off is she's misidentified and she stays misidentified until 2001. And so she doesn't start out as a Jane Doe. She starts out being identified as this girl who went missing August 2nd, 1997. And the way that goes down is this girl's name is Christy Jean Rogers. She goes missing the night of August 1st into the morning of August 2nd from a girlfriend's home in Crestview, Florida. What she was doing that night was she lied to her parents. And she said, I'm going to stay with such and such, but I'm actually staying with such and such. She was 16 years old at the time. She was 5'3", 109 pounds. Her boyfriend was that's where she was going. She was going to spend the night with her boyfriend. Now, her boyfriend's a kid named Mac Coffin. And he told authorities that Christy had left his house on North Lloyd Street at approximately 5 o'clock in the morning. This would have been August 2nd. And he had asked her to leave so that his grandparents, they lived next door to him, and they would be up very early in the morning. And he did not want his grandparents to know that she had been staying the night. So from her house to where the Coffins, to where Mac lived, the boyfriend lived, and the grandparents, it was about a mile. So it's, 10, 15-minute walk. But Christy Jean Rogers this case never gets cleared up. She never arrives home, and she's never been heard from again. Now, in February of 1998, this is 6 months later, a bag containing clothing that belonged to her was found in a wooded area behind the Crestview Plaza shopping center. That area had been searched by investigators and search and rescue dogs, cadaver dogs, and they believe that the bag was left there after that search. In that bag, they found a shirt, shorties, underpants, a bra, socks, keys, makeup. All of it was identified as belonging to Christy Rogers. The bag was not hidden, and the clothes inside appeared to have been exposed to the elements longer than the bag itself. Unidentified remains had been located in a canal that's right off Boynton Beach, Florida. And this is in 1999, so it would have been 2 years after Christy vanishes, this May 23rd, Palm Beach Jane Doe. She's in NamUs as UP 1082. This is who you pulled out, which I think is a good match for Danielle. But so authorities identify the body in to begin with as Christy. Her loved ones, they finalize the funeral arrangements, and by the time the mistake is corrected, even though the burial hasn't yet taken place, investigators have to do a dental record identification, and they realize that it's the wrong girl. It's not Christy. So they believe that Christy was a runaway, and then much later they decide that Christy is probably become a victim of foul play. Now, too long a period of time had passed for there to be a really good investigation there. And Matt Coffin was never considered to have been a suspect. Investigators stated his story made sense to them. But they described his relationship with Christy as being on again, off again. And they weren't having any problems. She did have a kidney condition. She had to take medication for the kidney condition. And it was a little weird for her to not have it with her. Charlie Project has her down as a 5'3", 109-pound, 16-year-old white female. She'd be 43 years old today. She had brown with some blonde, depending on which picture you look at, hair, brownish blonde hair, blue eyes. She had a lazy right eye. Her navel was pierced. Her ears were pierced. Her wisdom teeth had been removed. Her mom described her as naive and trusting, and authorities believe that she was abducted by someone she knew. August 1997, I don't think that puts her in the time frame for Lucius Boyd to be involved. It's interesting that you found this unidentified person that had been misidentified for Christy Jean.
How long was she misidentified?
Depends on which version you read. Unsolved Mysteries says that she was unidentified for a year, then misidentified as Christy Jean for a month. Charlie Project says the error lasted less than a week, meaning it looks like it was a dental record comparison error where they went to match up the Skull's dental records with Christie's, and whoever did that first round of matching made a mistake. So it's somewhere, it could be as early as May of 2000 that she's identified incorrectly, and as late as December 2000, early January 2001 that she's misidentified, depending on who's accurate here. There was suspicion that it was her for several months. I don't knowing Florida, unfortunately for me, there's some bad math going on here. And I say that from the perspective of, you've been to Florida, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Crestview, Florida, if I'm understanding what they're saying here, Crestview, Florida is not close to Boynton Beach. Crestview, Florida is something like 6 or 7 hours away from where Lucius Boyd would have been operating. It's up in the Panhandle, Crestview is, and Boynton Beach is down in South Florida.
Well, just to be clear, just because I think that this unidentified body could be Danielle doesn't mean I think Lucius Boyd is involved.
No. I'm with you on that. I just was bringing it back up in terms of talking about him because I do think that it's a good potential match for Danielle. In fact, I think it's a better match for Danielle than I think it is for Christy. I would never jump to Christy.
Well, and to me, I don't understand why it literally took me 2 seconds to find that.
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
That makes me think that somebody has to have already ruled her out for whatever reason.
I guess maybe. I was going to say, and I'm not trying to make you look good or bad or anything. I'm just saying I agree with you. I think it could be her. My one problem with it is the postmortem interval, which is the PMI is like, for those who don't know, when an unidentified body is found and, they mark the date of its discovery and they try to go backwards to the date that they believe the death occurred. Here, it's said that it might be a month. That's Florida, and a month could look like a year, but there is a difference in the dates.
What dates?
Well, if you look at her being discovered May 23rd, 1999, she has a PMI of
0 months.
Of a month. Yeah. It says
No,
1 month.
It says 0 months.
Oh, I got Palm Beach County Jane Doe pulled up. I see what you're saying. So they think that she had just died.
Right, but they thought it could be Christy, who was missing for longer, substantially longer. I will interject here that I don't know if you noticed, but like they don't have the eye color or they do have that the hair was straight, but usually when I see things like that and kind of a range or just like a 0,
yeah,
to me that means they couldn't tell.
I kind of want to reach out to Ives and ask him.
Well, it would be worth it to make sure it's not her, I think. If you look, and I'm telling you, like, this doesn't happen like every single time I go looking for people. But in this particular case, we're 25 years out, and it makes the most sense. I realize that there's space here, right? As far as the location of the Jane Doe versus where Danielle went missing from.
Yeah.
I also feel like there are aspects of her case that I'm not entirely sure that match up with Lucius's, MO, as far as the fact that, I mean, she had left her vehicle parked somewhere, and I have no idea if any of the other victims or possible victims had done that, right?
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that Danielle was a sex worker, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about drugs, but it's not mentioned anywhere, right? And so you're looking at two different situations, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And I think that especially, it seems like Danielle's family has focused on Lucius pretty intently. And I feel like sometimes that's what makes a possible perpetrator who is in jail for other crimes, I feel like that could make them shut down if they didn't do that crime, right? Because depending on their state of mind, if you've got people coming at you going, did you do this? Did you do this? And you have to be thinking to yourself, well, it doesn't matter what I say. They think I've done this, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point in me talking about it? It is, it's possible that he has nothing to do with Danielle. But see, that means there's a whole nother situation happening. This particular body, unidentified body, they said it could have been involved in a traffic incident, right? They don't give any sort of cause of death. There's no indication except for like some sort of injury to the eye. They don't give any indication of anything else going on, right? Which his MO is strangulation or stabbing, right?
Yeah.
And in the event that strangulation or stabbing happened to this unidentified body, if this body is bones, it's possible that there's no evidence of that.
Yeah.
It's also, it just depending on the state you find it in. Because we were recording, I didn't go back and look like, well, how many girls does it make sense that this person is, right? I didn't look at the missing people to see who all would make sense.
It's 30 minutes up the road, and it's like
only
months.
30 minutes?
This one is. Christy Rogers is the one who didn't fit. That's the misidentified girl. So
I'm sorry.
She's the one who lives in Crestview. If you go Fort Lauderdale to Boynton Beach, it's like 25, 30 minutes.
Well, that's not far at all. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I I didn't even look. I didn't know anything about the misidentification or anything.
Yeah, I had that was something. Sometimes I get these stacks and stacks of things that I'm doing. So at one point, both of these made my list of people who went missing from convenience store, gas stations, grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I came to be familiar with the Palm Beach County Jane Doe in the first place, and the misidentification as Christy Rogers. She went missing walking a very short distance. That's kind of rare. It's particularly like most of those cases, the boyfriend or the parents did it. In this case, it seems like in this very short period of time between about 5:15 and 5:45 in the morning, Christy Rogers went missing. But this is up in Crestview, Florida. That's not anything related to what we're talking about when we talk about Lucius Boyd and Danielle's case. That's down in South Florida. They have been on my pile of different people. And while I was looking at the pile, I discovered the misidentification. And, I get distracted that's like a squirrel to me. I look at it and I go, wait a second, they misidentified the dental records? And I spend a day or so looking at that, which is how I knew when you pulled her up.
I don't understand why she's not definitively excluded. To me, she would make, Susie Lyle is excluded as this person.
Yeah, there's something about this that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And so to me, Danielle would make more sense to be excluded over Susie Lyle in this particular situation, right?
Yeah.
And so when I see things like that, I'm like, okay, what's happening here? And because her family's, it sounds like her family is still involved in the search for her. It seems like they would have the information in the database, so it wouldn't be a lack thereof. Now, I've wondered this a couple of times actually recently. Whenever somebody's not excluded, does it indicate to anybody anywhere that they're a match?
What do you mean?
Well, like in this case, if Danielle's in there and every single thing about her case should tell a database to compare her DNA with this unidentified body's DNA, okay?
Right.
The timing, the place, everything, it should be a comparison. And if it's compared but not excluded, is there a flag that says this is a match? Or is it just not put on the excluded list?
I don't know.
Do you see the big gap that would create? Yeah. That's actually happened in several cases recently where I've looked. I feel like when we were doing all the missing people over Christmas, there were several people that it didn't make any sense that they wouldn't have been compared, right? Yet they weren't on each other's excluded list.
Yeah.
And that made me wonder, well, is it possible that all it does is make an exclusions list and until somebody figures out that they weren't excluded, there's nothing to indicate there's a match? And that would just be like a tiny little programming oversight, right? Yeah. Except it would be a huge deal because it would be all these people matching.
I do not know the answer to that.
But but under these circumstances, we happen to know quite a bit about Susie Lyle, and so she was compared here. So why wouldn't Danielle Zako be, right?
I don't even know why they would compare. I wonder why they would compare Susie Lyle at all.
That's my point, though. My point is that, if they went so far to compare her, right?
Yeah.
Because Danielle's in the same state, went missing just a couple months before the body was found, 30 miles away or whatever. And she fits size-wise and age-wise. And
not only that, the composite does not look far off of her face.
The composite looks exactly like her, in my opinion. But see, sometimes you can't really go off of that. But it's completely subjective. But my point is, I sent you over the list of.
I see the comparisons. Yeah, the exclusions.
Okay, and so because of that, it makes me go, well, I mean, is it possible that this is, they've been compared, not excluded, but there's nothing in the system that goes, hey, this is a match? Because if they haven't compared her, right?
Yeah.
And you see the list of exclusions and they haven't compared her, there's something wrong there, right? Because it makes the most logical sense that she would be like the very first comparison.
I mean, in my opinion, yeah.
I mean, she went missing close by where the body was found, in the same state, and all the other characteristics that match.
It makes a lot more sense. The only thing that's kind of weird is the timing. Like finding the body in May, her having gone missing earlier, but not that much earlier. She basically goes missing at the end of February. So we're talking, you'd have March, April. If they're thinking, if she's Bones, for instance, and it doesn't say that here, usually I can dig through and I can usually find like an exact description. But here's what I have. It says in the details of her recovery that she is not recognizable and it is a nearly complete or complete skeleton.
Right, and I think that could happen in Florida in 3 months, but
well, I
could be wrong.
I mean, I sent it over. You have to do some weird stuff down in Florida because when you have a and this is a good tip for anybody that's dealing with Florida, you can call up the medical examiner in Florida. If someone might be or is reported to be a juvenile, you will never hear back from them ever under any circumstances.
Well, she's not a juvenile.
I know. Other than that, you can actually call the medical examiner and get a pretty good answer to almost any question. In a case like this, in addition to calling the medical examiner, and I say that because like she has a NCMEC entry, just throwing that out there. I know she's 20-some years old. You can call Crime Stoppers in Florida, and they are really good down there because they've had some strange things happen over the years. They will, if you fill out a Crime Stoppers tip in Florida for something like this, where you think you know something, particularly if it has 2 points of contact on the internet. The first point of contact here, you could give them like the Charlie Project profile on Danielle that kind of lays out what happened to her, and then you could give them the NamUs profile 1082, and you could give that to somebody from Crime Stoppers. I say that because you're as close as these two things are to each other, you are still dealing with multiple jurisdictions.
Well, right. And to me, it just needs to be I know that it's not possible that I'm the only person that's noticed this.
Her NamUs case was created in April 2008, so it's one of the early ones. It's in the first, 1,100 entries to unidentified people. I sent it over again just in case somebody missed it. So let's see.
It needs to at least have an exclusion, in my opinion. Otherwise, I don't understand what's happening there.
Well, one of the things that gets interesting about these cases for me is when they throw in the vehicular homicide thing, it makes way more sense for me to see somebody that's out of Winn-Dixie getting hit by a drunk driver and that drunk driver driving the body away and throwing it away than like the Lucius Boyd thing. Even though she's tentatively tied to him.
She is, but see, that could be what's keeping it from being solved.
It could be, yeah. And the next thing I'll do is I'll reach out to Ives. Ives is Danielle's dad. I found him online. I think he's still alive. If he's still alive, I'm going to reach out and see if I can talk to him about that.
Okay, so she has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's got 5 exclusions.
Who does? Danielle?
Danielle. Yeah, so there is DNA on her. So if they're not excluded as being one another, why aren't they?
Tell me one exclusion she may have.
I'll send the whole thing to you.
Okay. So a number of things can happen here. It used to be they would tell you if they had DNA on file. It doesn't always say that. All right, so Fort Lauderdale Police has her. That's in Broward County. So once you get over the line there, okay, so you're saying she's excluded?
She's excluded from... I sent you the unidentified bodies exclusions, and this is Danielle's exclusions.
Yeah, I see the missing persons exclusions above that. All right, who do we got in here? Yeah, see, what's crazy to me is, like, look at the locations on these bodies and
Well, right, and you've
the
got
dates.
one
There's only one the one that's found in Hamilton. What state is that one?
Tennessee.
Yeah, they screwed up.
Well, I don't know that they screwed up, but I would say that it's weird. What if it doesn't give an indication that it wasn't excluded in that it matched?
I follow what you're saying. You're basically saying if it matches, it does not pop as an exclusion, and
But nothing else happens.
I have to ask this now of someone from NamUs, and it's honestly it's making my head hurt a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's not. No, it's not your fault.
What I just sent you, so we've established that whatever basis exclusions are made off of, Danielle and UP 1082 both have that underlying factor present in their profile because they both have exclusions. Okay. In all of the unidentified people and missing people in NamUs, like these two should absolutely have been compared against one another. But there's no indication that that occurred.
Well, I'm about to ask that question of NamUs, so.
But you agree though that it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I specifically mentioned that when you're in this smaller area, you can have all kinds of problems related to jurisdictional issues. This could be as simple as one jurisdiction thinks the other jurisdiction did it, and NamUs thinks they can't be that close together. We don't need to compare anything that close together. It makes no sense because NamUs may have a directive. If you look at this list here, none of these people are even close to here. Well, no, they aren't. The Hamilton, Tennessee is not even close to there.
Why would that?
Well, maybe they're looking for things that would not have been done by other agencies. Like NCIC is another entry for both of these things. Danielle's missing person report will be in NCIC, the National Crime Index computer. So will this unidentified person. So if they weren't declared a match by whatever failsafe happened there, then they may have no reason to compare them in NamUs, which is what I'm going to ask NamUs now. Do you see what I mean?
No, I don't. How would they have not been declared a match by whatever failsafe?
Oh, it can be as simple as someone writes that the skeleton weighed 25 pounds. And the missing persons report says that the girl weighed 100 to 120 pounds. That alone can exclude in the National Crime Index computer. Like they could literally say the skeleton weighed 25 pounds for the unidentified person instead of no estimate, which is what they're supposed to put. Or it could be a height discrepancy. Say they didn't get the lower body bones.
I don't see that reflected in the comparisons that are made, though.
They would never make it into NamUs.
Right, but I see things that are excluded that are discrepancies like you just described.
They would never make it into NamUs if they were matched in the NCIC computer because they would no longer be missing. So they would never get to NamUs. Like NamUs is secondary. Like if you go into NamUs right now.
Does that explain why there was not a comparison made between Danielle and UP 1082?
What do you mean?
What you're saying. Does that explain it?
Potentially. Because they may think that NCIC ruled them out because they're so close together. Surely FDLE looked at this. And surely since Broward, Palm Beach County has a joint county law enforcement resource, and one took place in Broward and the other took place in Palm Beach, surely that comparison was made. When in fact it wasn't made at the NCIC level. Here's a for instance. You sent me that one of Danielle's unidentified person exclusions was a January 16th, 2001 case out of the Isle of Wight County in Virginia. Oh, I know what it is. It's the postmortem interval. That is the difference. This postmortem interval is 5 years. The estimated postmortem interval for 1082 is 0. So because they tapped the estimated postmortem interval as 0, it has to be someone who went missing within 30 days of the discovery of the body.
Well, wouldn't that make the postmortem interval be 30 days?
0 months means less than 1. 31 days it would be the month that it considered from a machine perspective. So 30 days is less than a month.
I feel like the most logical explanation here is that like it doesn't flag a match. It just puts exclusions on a list.
So we have a new serial killer case that relates back to Herb Baumeister. In a way, kind of. It's another case related to a highway. So we'll come back with that next week. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
All right, so I'm going to tell you guys a few things about some of the folks who are helping sponsor our show. Now, Labrati Creations sponsors our show, and you can always use the Crime XS code there. You can also just message them at Labrati Creations, and they will generally do something for the people who come from True Crime XS. They were our very first sponsor. They've done a lot for the show, and that code is CrimeXS at LabratiCreations.com. The first new advertisers that we have, and I've selected all of these guys. I've selected all of these advertisers. So the very first one is Cure. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about this, about Cure as being one of our sponsors. If you're an athlete, you know that proper hydration is key to peak performance, but plain water can be boring and sports drinks can be filled with artificial ingredients and added sugars. That's why we love Cure. It's a clean and effective way to stay hydrated and perform at your best. I use it late in the day when I switch out of caffeine mode. Specifically, when I hit the pool or I go play tennis with my wife, I use Cure to help me stay hydrated. It helps me recover after a long day. Now, you guys may not know this, but I build things. Right now, I've been building several structures on our property out here. Among those is a new podcast studio space for myself. I do a lot of that work at night and into the wee hours, and I always have some Cure with me to go into my aluminum water bottle. Hydration is not just about filling up my aluminum bottle with water. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and rehydrate quickly. Whether I'm building things or putting the podcast together or chasing these dogs that you sometimes hear in my studio up and down the trails to get them worn out, Cure Hydration is the way that I choose to go. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution, or an ORS, that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and to rehydrate quickly. The formula is made with all natural ingredients like coconut water powder and pink Himalayan salt. It's free from artificial flavors, from sweeteners, and preservatives. Cure Hydration is vegan, gluten-free, and non-GMO, making it a great option for anyone with dietary restrictions or preferences. The packets are convenient and easy to use. You just mix them with your water and you drink. They're perfect for on the go. They're perfect for travel. And anytime you need a quick and effective hydration boost, ready to combat dehydration, then you try Cure today and feel the difference for yourself. You can use code TrueCrimeXS for 20% off your order. That's TrueCrimeXS. I have a link that I'm putting in the most recent episode show notes, and True Crime Access will get you 20% off. Our second sponsor for the show today is Laird. Now, Laird has a list of things that they want me to tell you about. They have better ingredients with amazing taste and functional benefits. They have a superfood creamer crafted from the highest quality, all-natural, real food ingredients. All Laird products are sustainably sourced and thoroughly tested to ensure that you're incorporating the cleanest, finest fuel into your routine. They have all natural whole food ingredients, and they contain naturally occurring MCTs made from coconut oil. There's no artificial flavors, there's no colors or additives, and there's no sugar from highly refined corn syrup. They want me to talk about my love of coffee, but the truth is, I don't do much with coffee. But let me tell you someone who does. My wife has to have a cup of coffee every day. Now, I've fallen off recently, but one of the big things that I've done since the beginning of our relationship is she used to go and get a Starbucks every morning. I have substituted that out by always trying to make her coffee. It's not going to be every single day of time from when I met her, but for the most part, almost every day, I make her coffee. I put her creamers together, and I make sure that she has a good way to start her day. So with Laird, he started experimenting with his morning ritual almost 2 decades ago. He found that when he started adding fats to his morning cup, like coconut oil, he had amazing energy throughout the rest of his day. He gradually perfected this recipe for an epic cup of fuel, and he began sharing it with his friends in the surf community. I'm an ocean guy, so I saw this item and I was like, okay, we're going to try this one out. Are you ready to feel more energized, more focused, and supported? Go to lairdsuperfood.com and add nourishing plant-based foods to fuel you from sunrise to sunset. And you can use our promo code at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today. Our offer code for this for Laird is going to be TrueCrimeXS. Pretty much everywhere except for Labarte Creations, if you use TrueCrimeXS, that will get you, at Laird, it'll get you 15% off. At some of the other places, they'll get you 20% off. I'm going to tell you about 2 more sponsors today. So the first one is, the third one is Liquid IV. So let's talk about the real reasons that you need to hydrate. Late night TV binging, back-to-back Zoom meetings, going on a walk with your friends. Everyday hydration is not just for high-energy athletic endeavors. Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It's now available in sugar-free. This is years in the making, but Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free uses a proprietary zero-sugar hydration solution with no artificial sweeteners. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, but it's also got 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone. Keep your daily routine exciting with 3 new flavors. They've got white peach, green grape, and lemon lime. I love all of these flavors, but I think that my favorite is probably the green grape. White peach I use as a secondary flavor, and lemon lime I leave here for my kids and my wife. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. They also partner with leading organizations to fund and foster innovative solutions that help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50-plus countries around the world. You can get 20% off when you grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free or any other variant at liquidiv.com and use code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code TrueCrimeXS at liquidiv.com. And the last sponsor I want to tell you about is Zencastr. We are part of Zencastr's creative network. We've been using Zencastr since about midway into our first season. Meg and I experimented with a lot of different ways to put the podcast together. And the truth is, Zencastr was an integral ingredient to us being able to bring you this show. It's so easy. It's now super easy. You can record a podcast with Zencastr. You can log in using your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You can record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guest. You get to feel a sense of zen, knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you will always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. You sound your best. I mean, if you've ever worried about what you sound like, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recordings. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. You can set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. That's how you don't hear my dogs every second of every episode. Zencastr is all in one. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are now over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place, and you can distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code TrueCrimeXS, and you're going to get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. You can also check out the other plans they have available. I want you to have the same easy experiences that I do for all my podcasting and content needs. So zencastr.com/pricing. The offer code is TrueCrimeXS, and it's time for you to share your story today. We are also adding New Era as a sponsor for the show. New Era Cap is a headwear and apparel brand founded in 1920 in Buffalo, New York. Now, I actually have some experience with New Era caps. My dad and I have been through multiple iterations of baseball caps through the years. We collect different styles, different eras, and now my teenager has started his own cap collection and has several New Eras as the centerpieces. Our favorite teams may not be the same, but our outfits are all topped with the same New Era ball caps. We love the quality and the ability to wear what the players are wearing. Not to mention, New Era is the leading headwear manufacturer with quality licensed products. You can support your favorite college or pro team in style, from the official headwear provider for the MLB, NFL, and NBA. You can get a stylish accessory for your everyday ensemble and support True Crime XS. Just shop the official headwear and get 15% off when you go to neweracap.com. That's neweracap.com/TrueCrimeXS. You can also use the code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that's 15% off your order using the promo code TrueCrimeXS.